Welcome to Fanboy Frenzy, the crossroad of entertainment and intelligence.
Well, America, we're in another familiar place, aren't we? Another somber evening. Actually, it's been a somber week, Fanboy Frenzy Army. Anyone with a heart, anyone with a mind, anyone that has empathy for human beings obviously cannot go a day without thinking about the 17 lives that were lost in Florida just a few days ago when gunman Nicholas Cruz went into Stoneman Douglas High School and began to open fire and killed 14 children and 3 faculty members. Now, obviously, today there was a rally, and one of the students really has some quotes that were used in the speech that she gave, and it was a very impassioned speech, one could assume. Her name was Emma Gonzalez, and she said, quote, "Maybe the adults have got used to saying it is what it is. But if us students have learned anything, it's that if you don't study, you will fail. And in this case, if you actively do nothing, people will continually end up dead." And then there were shouts of shame on you, etc. And so what I want to talk a little bit about is to break down some very centrist perspectives and ask some questions. I'm not on here to rant. I'm not on here to curse and to act like the Hulk and smash everything in sight. I really want to have a heart-to-heart with everybody because I fear for our country and for the next generation if we continue to not have these in-depth conversations, which you're not getting in the mainstream media. If you're not tuning in to Fanboy Frenzy or some other independent media outlet, you're not getting the truth. So let's talk about the warnings for a minute. There was a math teacher named Jim Gard. I was doing some research, and he was told by an administrator back in 2016 that if this young man showed up on the school campus with a backpack to please let them know. Okay, so that's number one. Now, this has been going on multiple times with this kid. He obviously was a troubled youth. As a matter of fact, some teachers talked about he had been suspended previously. He displayed what was called nebulous behavior. That's some deep shit right there. But this nebulous behavior has been seen not only in the schools, but on social media. Last September, a blogger noticed on a YouTube page or on a comment section that this same man talked about he was going to be a school shooter. Yeah, he was going to go in there and just kill a bunch of kids. Well, guess what? He told the FBI, and what did they do? Dick. I guess they're too busy talking about the Trump bullshit collusion story, but that's for another day. And not to mention on his Instagram page and other pages, he had racially charged comments talking about blacks should be left in chains, etc., etc. And even one real classy quote, he says, quote, "I think I'm going to kill some people," end quote. And so one has to ask the question, what the fuck is the purpose of being on an FBI watch list? And can we change the name to FBI watch list to, I don't know, something like put their ass in a prison cell watch list, or maybe even, here's a good one, break down their doors and kick their ass before they kill someone watch list. Yeah, that came from me. A little pissed off as I write this because I have kids in school myself. And you know what? It's a scary thought to think that somebody could come into their school with a gun, an assault rifle, and begin to open fire and just kill a swath of children, all because they had a bad day and they're fucked up in the head. But that really brings up to some real talk we have to have. And the first thing, why don't anyone talk about mental illness? Why is it that Barbara Streisand and all these libtards out here talk about, oh, here goes the conservatives talking about mental illness? I got to ask you something. Why does it have nothing to do with it? I mean, does mentioning it demean the lives that were lost? I don't think so. As a matter of fact, it might answer some of the questions. You know, when a terrorist attack happens, the left always comes out and says the real terrorist is a white male. Why? Because most shootings are done by white males. And so I began to do some digging, and this is some of the statistics I came up with. First of all, 1 in 6 Americans are actually on some type of psychiatric medication. Twice as many of those are white people. Actually, they're, double versus what African Americans and other minorities actually are on, or at least the rate of percentage that they're on these psychotropic drugs. And generally, at least 84% of them refill their scripts at least 3 times. So they're not staying on them incrementally, but they're staying on them permanently. And as a matter of fact, many depression drugs do lead to anger, anxiety, and suicidal thoughts. One of the primary, I guess you could say methods of alleviating depression are what's called SSRIs. And SSRIs are known as selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. One of the things that people don't often talk about, and I think about, is I have a father that's 73 years old. And my father, he grew up in a day and age when school shootings were unheard of. And actually, school shootings and mass shootings like this since the late 80s, or up until the late 80s, were really non-existent. It really wasn't until Prozac came out and was created by Eli Lilly that you started to see an uptick in some of these events. Now, I know that the left hates for the right or any conservative to talk about mental illness, but it needs to be discussed because almost every instance, let me say this again, almost every instance, including Mr. Cruz, this latest shooter, was on some type of depression medication. I'm just going to go over a couple of numbers. Eric Harris from the Columbine shooting, he was on a drug called Lovix. The Virginia Tech shooter, same thing. Kip Kinkle, that was the shooter. He was on Prozac. Jason Hoffman, he was on a drug called Effexor. And even the Colorado movie theater shooter, he too was on medication. Most of the people that commit these crimes, yes, most of them are white males. And if you look at the data, that could actually have some type of a bearing on it. I mean, it doesn't mean all white people are nuts and batshit crazy. It just means that some of them on these drugs, obviously it has an effect. But here's something that kind of strikes me. A lot of them are young people. Did you know that 6 million young people identify as having ADHD? And it seems like our pharmaceutical industry are very excited and eager to get drugs into the hands of the population. Now, there's plenty of videos to be made about that, and possibly there's a conspiracy behind that. But roughly those 6 million, that number 6 million has went up from 2003 to 2012 by 43%. And mostly boys, goes back to, again, white males, boys tend to be 3 times more likely for this to occur. But the problem is, why do we never hear this? Why is it CNN, MSNBC, Fox, and all of them refuse to really talk about mental illness? Could it be because Big Pharma spent last year about $250 million lobbying our Washington politicians to get pharmaceutical-friendly bills passed in Congress? Could it be that almost every major network except for CBS has someone on their board that works for the pharmaceutical industry? Could that have anything to do with it? Could it be possibly that some of these politicians, there's a handful, they're nefarious assholes, and possibly want to see the majority of the population drugged out of their fucking minds so they cannot see the new monarchy they're creating right underneath our nose? Is it possible? These are questions that aren't being asked, and Fanboy Frenzy is going to ask them. And I want to know what you think. But this isn't all, man. I'm sorry for the gun nuts out there. I mean, I'm a fan of guns, but the next question we have to ask is gun regulation. Why is it that, we talk about the Founding Fathers and the Second Amendment, and obviously I'm a fan of tank tops because that's what the right to bear arms is about, right? That's not it. So it's not about having bearing arms. Oh, it's about guns. Oh, well, you know what? You know what they used to do back in the day? They had what were called muskets. And it would take you like fucking an hour and a half to load that bitch. So, yeah, I think the idea of an AR-15, a chain gun, fucking AK-47, or even a fully automatic 9mm, obviously that's probably not what they had in mind. But I'm a fan of guns, and I think we need to be able to arm ourselves to protect our homes, but not from your neighbor as much as from the government. That's the reason that it was instituted to begin with. But in Florida, there are laws that even allow, if you're a doctor and you have a batshit crazy patient in there, if they don't have an aura of dangerousness around them, even though they're angry, they're depressed, they're full of anxiety, they could snap at any minute. If they don't have prolonged anger issues, they can still get a gun. What about gun shows? What about all these laws that are supposed to be in place to protect innocent people like these children? Now, I know children, the left don't give a shit about children. All they want is gun control, all right? They don't give a shit about children because if you did, the first thing that happens when this occurs is not to politicize the deaths of children, you pricks. I said I wouldn't get angry. I lied, okay? I'm pissed off because I looked at the faces of these children, and it angers me that these pricks in Washington who all get money from Big Pharma and from these other industries have the gall, the fucking gall, to tell you and I that we should just ban guns. Well, shouldn't ban guns, but we should definitely look into where the breakdown is. And if you don't agree with that, I don't know what fucking planet you live on. Nobody that's on psychotropic drugs, SSRIs, especially for an extended period of time, knowing the risk factors, should be allowed to purchase a gun. Especially this prick. This kid had to be kicked out of his school and go to like a secondary school because of anger issues. And yet, those legal ramifications, the legal loopholes, if you will, that are present, the FBI, you know what? I'm going to back up. Do you know who also should be blamed for this shit? I got to back up for a second. Facebook and YouTube and Twitter. Because these guys, these organizations, they only care about money and power. The FBI tried to find out who made that comment that blogger, tied to Cruz, of course. But they wanted to find out what server was it tied to, and they were not given that information because of the civil libertarians out there. Oh, we can't give up anybody's information because then they could come after mine. Well, you know what? There has to be some type of compromise, folks, because if not, this is what happens. There's blood on our hands. This is just one man's opinion, of course. What say you? But also I'm going to talk about sanctity of life. Now, I know liberals out there, they care more about child molesters than they do children in the womb, but I got to ask you, so what part of society thinks it's okay for babies who are the most innocent among us, the weakest among us, to be slaughtered at the tune of 1 to 1.5 million a year? Why? Not because the primary numbers are rape, and that's why women choose to abort the baby, or because the mother's going to die during childbirth. No. Most of them are done because of good old Margaret Sanger's family planning. So the question comes, could it be also that in addition to lax gun regulations and a huge uptick in the mental health problems of America, which is just being doused with all these antidepressants, which lead to sometimes really erratic, violent behavior, could it be that we've lost sight of what the sanctity of life is? Could it be that we're planting seeds in the ground and this is what's coming forth? I mean, every seed that's planted grows. Could it be that the loss of life and the slaughter of innocent children, that America's chickens are coming home to roost? Is that possibly what it could be? I pray it's not. But you know what? When every television show, video games, music, everything seems to be so violent, when you got movies like Hostel and Saul out there, which are popular, and it's all about slaughtering people, how do you think that acts on the minds of those who are obviously already troubled? I mean, I grew up 8 years old watching Freddy, watching Jason. I never wanted to kill or hurt anybody. I kind of go with what Penn Jillette said. I've killed and raped everybody I wanted to, which is 0. And I agree with that. Most of us are like that. But the problem is there are those around us who, unfortunately, have very bad situations in life, which lead us to the next point, which is, what about the broken home problem in America? 50% of all marriages are actually, into divorce. And most statistics show that teenagers with single parents generally are 300 times more likely to need psychological help and drugs. Moreover, twice as many children who are in situations where their parents split, they are more likely to commit suicide and have violent behavior, violent thoughts, depressive thoughts. So the question is, America, Fanboy Frenzy Army, you can see this isn't a typical video. This is really a heart-to-heart conversation. I could pretend that we're sitting across from each other at a bar, or possibly even sitting across from each other at a yuppie Starbucks, asking the same questions. But I don't know that there's any positive answers because it's a multifaceted issue, but I want to know what you think. I want you to take a few minutes and please make sure you subscribe to our channel, and please make sure you like the video and share the video. I want to know, and also make sure you comment for sure. I want to know what you think. I want to know what your thoughts are. I'm sure that the thought that's in my head is exactly what's in yours, Fanboy Frenzy Army. And that is, I hope and pray this doesn't happen again. But until we have discussions about these issues I just raised here, it's guaranteed to happen again. Until next time, Fanboy Frenzy Army, this is Ryan Jarvis signing off. We'll see you soon.